Welcome to the North Carolina State Medical Response System Initial Training Program for the State Medical Assistance Team. This presentation covers Module 5, Communications. This module suggests several prerequisites. Specifically, the Viper Medical Network and North Carolina Medical Communications Network online training links were provided for you as a supplemental assignment and should be reviewed prior to completing the lecture. This module has 5 objectives. The first 2 include: first, understand the definition of disaster communications and identify methods of communicating. Second, identify various communication tools and their situational uses. Third, discuss team-specific communication devices and when each would be used in an event. Fourth, demonstrate the ability to place a call via an SMAT radio and use this system to communicate with other responders through a hands-on activity. Fifth, demonstrate proper language for disaster communications through a hands-on activity. Obviously, Objectives 4 and 5 are beyond the scope of this online course. You will need to complete any hands-on work with your SMAT team leadership to become familiar with the communications equipment operated by your team. It should also be understood that being able to communicate effectively plays a significant role in life safety. Mayday, as defined in Webster's Dictionary, is an international signal word used as a distress call. In any life-threatening or serious injury situation, emergency calls on radio systems have automatic highest priority. The Mayday call must include your location, identification, and the problem. Mayday 3 times, followed by your location, identification, and the problem will initiate a response by the team. Your location is a critical piece of information. If you do not state the location, the search team will not know where to start looking. Please be sure to review any policy regarding life safety that your team may have and pay close attention to all safety briefings during an event or deployment. Also, generally 3 blasts of an air horn or siren is the universal signal for evacuation. The rally area for accountability should be covered in the operational period safety briefing. Disaster communications is the means and methods of transmitting and receiving information and images vital to the successful management of an event where the communications infrastructure has been impaired or lost. You may see many types of radio and satellite communications being used during a deployment, including amateur radio, military-affiliated radio systems, very small aperture terminal or VSAT, and mobile satellite or MSAT telecommunications. These are adjunct services that may enhance operations but are not the primary radio communication systems of the SMRS. By whom, when, and how these methods are used is determined by command staff and coordinated through the communications unit leader, who has responsibility for managing the frequency spectrum for the event. Although they are used frequently in disaster communications, most of us today are familiar with common office communications methods such as fax, phone systems, instant messaging, and the internet. For the purposes of this course, we will focus on radio communications and the types of equipment and methods primarily used by the State Medical Response System and the equipment you would be using during a deployment. It is important to understand there is a specific flow of information into and out of the deployment site. The incoming communication flow begins with an outside agency contacting the team via radio, satellite phone, web EOC, or other established method. Next, the information is received at the Incident Communications Center. The Communications Center sends the information or request to the appropriate team leader via radio or general message form. The team leader reviews the information and forwards it to the appropriate resource. For outgoing communications, information or a request is given to a team leader via radio or general message. The team leader reviews the request and passes it to the Communications Center via radio or general message. The Incident Communications Center uses the appropriate method to transmit the request or information. And finally, the outside contact confirms receipt of the information or request. While this seems like a lengthy process, it helps ensure that the appropriate information is given to the appropriate recipient via the appropriate channels with appropriate priority compared to any other pending communications, and so that the information or request can be tracked. The ICS Form 213, or General Message Form, is the most frequent and simplest method of formal communication at a deployment site. It is easily used for person-to-person communication by messenger delivery. It also provides documentation of messages exchanged. Cell phones and social media can create hazards and have an adverse impact on operations, if the cell phones are functional at all. Use of these may divert a person's attention in the operational area from tasks at hand and cause accidents or serious injury to occur. Personnel should be aware of their agency's policies regarding their use. The use of these devices may be restricted by command staff. Now that we've covered some introductory information, we'll begin covering operational communications. Most operational communications in and around the deployment area will be conducted by the means of UHF pre-programmed radios. These are the common walkie-talkie type radios that have the frequencies and access tones pre-programmed by channel. These are used in operational areas for internal and maintenance traffic. Use of these radios for these purposes keeps traffic off of the main interoperability systems. When it is deemed appropriate for a responder to have a radio, that responder will be issued a radio by the communications unit leader. The responder will also be assigned to an appropriate channel based on the published Incident Radio Communications Plan, or ICS 205. The most widely used radio for deployment site communications is the 16-channel pre-programmed handheld UHF radio. The first 4 channels are SMAT channels, and beginning with channel 16 and working backwards, 15, 14, 13, etc., are the corresponding MED10 channels with pre-programmed letter-designated DTMF reference codes which provide for hospital contact by area. The SMRS PAC radio is similar to the radios you would find in many public safety vehicles, and presently has access to the MED8 and MED10 channels available in all 100 counties across North Carolina. This radio is capable of serving as a mobile base station. MED8 is used for patient care and other medical communications to a receiving hospital or medical facility. MED10 is the primary calling channel between units, hospitals, and other medical facilities. It is also the network control channel by which control operators may manage the network. As noted in the prerequisites for this module, the State Medical Response System has 2 major radio communication systems. First was the North Carolina Viper Medical Network, using the Viper 800 MHz trunked radio system, and second was the North Carolina Medical Communications Network, or NCMCN, of which we use primarily the MED8 and MED10 channels as listed above. If you have not already reviewed the online training for each of these systems, please be sure and do so. The use of these systems during a deployment will be governed by the Incident Radio Communications Plan, or ICS Form 205, which is issued for the event by the Communications Unit Leader. We will briefly review the Viper Medical Network. Displayed here is the most common Viper Medical Network portable radio in use by the SMRS. For interoperability, every radio that functions as part of the Viper Medical Network must have a common group of channels with standard channel names. The Viper Medical Network radios must be equipped with a series of talk groups which are similar to channels in a conventional legacy radio. The standardized talk groups for the Viper Medical Network radios are set up into 7 classifications. These include statewide medical talk groups, statewide calling talk groups, statewide event talk groups, State Highway Patrol Common and Mutual Aid Talk Groups, North Carolina Emergency Management Approved Talk Groups, statewide Roamer Talk Groups, and statewide General Pool Talk Groups. The Viper Medical Network provides a talk group channel for each hospital in the state, thus enabling Viper Medical Network users of the Viper radio system the ability to contact hospitals for medical or patient care communications. Within the North Carolina SMRS function, there are presently 8 channels designated for rescue, EMS, and SMAT, and these are located in the VML zone of the Viper Medical template. For additional information and course offerings related to communications, contact the North Carolina Department of Crime Control and Public Safety, Division of Emergency Management, Training and Exercise Registration Management System at the following website. We'll round out this module on communications with a discussion of the phonetic alphabet and some rules for effective radio communications. To clarify words in communications, sometimes they need to be spelled. The use of a phonetic alphabet has been adopted as the accepted method of spelling words to ensure accuracy. When spelling a difficult word, using a phonetic alphabet helps eliminate confusion, as some letters may sound the same to a person receiving a message. Most radio operators have adopted the military phonetic alphabet as the standard. Take a few moments to read each letter and its corresponding word out loud. Communication should be done in plain language. This eliminates confusion between individuals that may come from wildly different operational groups or backgrounds and is compliant with the NIMS concept. Be courteous. Listen before you transmit to avoid interrupting other conversation. If in doubt, press the push to talk button and ask if the channel or frequency is in use. If it is being used, someone will let you know. If not, you may proceed with your call. Finally, push the button, take a breath, and then speak. In summary, during this module we have defined disaster communications, identified means and methods of communicating that are commonly used within the North Carolina State Medical Response System during an event or deployment, and we have explored various communication tools and their situational uses, including the proper language that should be used during a disaster.